I think it was Senator Brophy who brought that up, who said it's not in the state constitution. And I could be wrong on that. I'd have to go back. But I think he's the one who brought that up and said, you know, we have to look at elements that are things that are in the state constitution. It was interesting because after we went through the core functions, at least that I saw, which again were, you know, public safety, security, 2 is infrastructure, 3 is education, and then I got the question, well, where does healthcare fall in there? And I said, I don't have a problem saying we should have that social safety net taking care of the least among us. I mean, but but it's not one of those core functions. You have 1, 2, 3, and then down here, and what, for instance, Senator Brophy said, there are needs and wants. These are the things we absolutely have to have, and then we would have that social safety net. But healthcare, I had a problem with that terminology. I mean, this is where this commission is so hard because we have different political philosophies, and healthcare to me is not. It's not a right. It's not necessarily a right that government bestows upon somebody. And so I said I had a problem with that very terminology. It implies that the state will then supply health care to everyone.
The idea of this commission, pardon me, from a layperson's point of view, really seemed that this was to take care of what people say is a knot between Gallagher, Tabor, 23, what was the Burt Arbuscal 6% limit, which has now been changed. I'm assuming that's where you're spending most of your time. If this is about fiscal stability, I'm having a sense that a lot of it is how much money are we getting in, how much money are we getting out, and how do we make the funding decisions? Am I on target?
Well, I think that most of the discussion we've had now are what are the 6 areas that take up most of the general fund spending, which would be taxes. A lot of state government is funded through either cash funds or from the federal government. We're mostly focused on the general fund, which rises and falls with the economy, and how that is the funding for that to fund those essential services adequate. From that would back out, well, if it's not adequate, then what are some alternatives to that, or what are some solutions to that? So again, it's not just the constitutional piece, it's the overall, I think one question is the overall tax structure and whether the tax structure keeps pace with economic conditions.
And I would agree with that part. Again, I go back to some of the issues with this commission. It does seem sometimes we talk about a lot of different things, because for instance, you're talking about the general fund, but the total budget, what is the general fund? $7 billion, yeah. But next year's budget is $18.7 billion. So sometimes it seems like we are trying to micro-target parts of the budget as opposed to looking at what the broad, general, I guess, the purpose of the commission is.
Here's my concern, just again from the outside, is I've seen a lot of these commissions, and I have a sense that a lot of these commissions are stacked in one direction or the other. When Fast Track's commission went forward, I knew they were going to recommend a tax increase. When the Senate 208 commission came over for health care, I knew that they were going to try to do something on the lines of what Massachusetts did. And sure enough, that were some of the recommendations. How objective is this commission? Now, Raleigh Heath is someone who absolutely despises the taxpayer Bill of Rights. He's made no secret about that. I'm worried as a taxpayer that I'm worried about the balance on this. Give me an idea. How representative is this commission of the complete political spectrum as far as it's weighted? Could you?
I think it's very representative. Actually, I think the all parts of whether the legislators and the appointees are very representative of a broad view, and I think our discussion has been. We've had a lot of viewpoints, but I think there's been a diverse viewpoints expressed. For example, one of the things that we talked about, we had a session where we talked about what have we learned here and what are some common themes before we talked about the essential pieces of government. And the common discussion there were things around the importance of public-private partnerships and of having, for example, nonprofits be delivering public services as they do today in healthcare and mental health and developmentally disabled and youth mentoring, and how effective that is, and that's a key piece of making a public dollar go farther. And there was a lot of agreement with that. There was also agreement of when we're spending tax dollars, how do we know what the return on investment is? And should we be having a greater degree of performance-based budgeting? So that's been a big part of the discussion. But really at the end of the day, there are trends for the general fund that the K-12 education, Medicaid and corrections in particular now account for 76 cents out of every dollar. And if that trend goes on without revenues matching that, there are going to be some hard choices, and there are going to be things that can't be done that people, not politicians, but people want to have done from state government.
Talk to me about the makeup of the board.
Well, I would say there are probably, if you're just going to look at basic philosophy, there are 5, 6 that lean more right of center. I don't know. There's probably, I'm not going to say all the other 10 lean left of center, but they were appointed by Democrats in the state legislature. And you know what? Let's face it, the left of center coalition is in charge. I mean, I don't think that's a secret, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, this is a commission. I think that Senator Brophy, who sits on the commission, even voted against it because he felt, I think, kind of the way you did. But even so, I think since this commission's going forward, I have no problems sitting there, or at least giving my philosophy from a more free market conservative perspective. I think it's important that it's heard. Whatever comes out of the commission, that if we all agree, and for instance, if we all agree that we spend too much, then we might come to a consensus. I don't know that we're going to come to a consensus because there is the trend, as Renny pointed out, that if revenues don't match, well, if we're spending more than revenue, I mean, there are 2 ways to sort of frame that argument.
Well, that's why the need is very important.
That's exactly.
Do we agree on what the need is?
Yeah.
And I would say that Senator Heath has really tried hard to have consensus among the group, and he's brought all members in from all viewpoints to have an equal discussion in it. So he really does want to have involvement of the broad group of folks, and they're business people on the commission, Donna Lynn, who's the head of Kaiser Permanente, and Chris White, who's the CFO at the Colorado Housing Finance Authority. So it's got a broad range of viewpoints.
And that's terrific, but there's only one taxpayer representative there who is from the Colorado Union of Taxpayers. And quite often businesses are not small government. When you take a look at tax increases, you'll find that it's largely governments who are the ones pushing them. I'll go back to fast tracks. Even your organization, the not-for-profits, many of them receive a fair amount of funding from government. So they are also on the dole, if you will, and that they need that money.
Well, that's not to say that they're not voters and that they don't have a perspective that should be represented and balanced. And I wouldn't say they're on the dole. I would say they take a public dollar, they put it into their private nonprofit association, they match that with many privately donated dollars, and they provide a public service. They
do indeed, but they receive direct cash money from the government, which means that they're among the special interests who want to see more money coming through government, and that's all right to say. Before we go on the money that comes in, and one of my big frustrations is we always take a look at government as the amount of money that comes in. And then we say, here are the costs, how much money do we get in? We never really spend a whole lot of time focusing, and Republicans and Democrats are equally awful at this, of how we spend that cash. We don't really measure governmental services at cost per service. We don't do a lot of what is the cost per pothole, what is the cost per kid here, and once you start doing that, you start finding ways to find efficiencies and find competitive contracting and all sorts of things. And that's the performance-based budgeting. I know that's something that you've been involved with, and tell me about that, because I don't think we've had a full discussion, even when Bill Owens was governor, about how to implement priority-based budgeting in the state.
And I think you're right, and actually what I didn't realize, this is something I learned in the commission, is we have a zero-based budgeting statute. I had no idea, but apparently it's too hard, so they don't do it.
So there's a law that says we have to do it,
but I mean, from what I understand, that's what Don Marostica said. Is that not accurate?
I don't know if it's in the statute, but